Hello, good afternoon and evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the politics panel of the LSE Student Union India Forum LIF 2022. My name is Hasti Modi. I'm the president of LIF and a second-year Master of Public Administration student at the LSE. I will be serving as your co-moderator this evening. Today, we'll be having a very insightful and an engaging discussion on the run-up to 2024 elections, decoding the 2022 elections from the lens of regional parties, regional alliances, and national dominance. This is in line with our main theme of our conference, which is Rethink, Restructure, Rebuild. Before we begin, I wanted to take a minute to thank everyone on the LIF team, which has organized this massive event for us this week. The LIF has an enduring legacy for serving as the largest student-led India-centric conference in the UK. And this year, we are proud to provide both international and domestic students an avenue to engage with truly inspirational Indian personalities from various industries. Speaking of inspirational Indian personalities, I'm humbled to introduce our seriously impressive panel for today, Mrs. Supriya Sule, who is the Member of Parliament of the Nationalist Congress Party representing Baramati. First elected in 2006, Mrs. Sule has been a staunch advocate against female feticide and the dowry system in India. She believes in empowering women and has worked extensively in promoting advancement of women's positions in society, especially by encouraging young women to get involved in politics. She belongs to a renowned political family in India. She is the daughter of Mr. Sharad Pawar, who is the founder and the president of the Nationalist Congress Party, NCP, one of the 8 national political parties in India. She is also well known for her social service initiatives and has been felicitated with the Mumbai Women of the Decade Achievers Award by All Ladies League. More recently, in the end of February 2022, Mrs. Sule was awarded the Sansad Ratna Award for the 7th time in a row for her exemplary parliamentary performance. Hearty congratulations and thank you for joining us today, ma'am. Mr. Suhel Seth, a prominent columnist, TV commentator, and a businessman. Mr. Seth is the Managing Director of Counselage India. Founded in 2006, Counselage is the only strategic marketing and branding consultancy in India. Additionally, Mr. Seth is the board member at several organizations such as Cavendish and Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, and also serves on regional boards of firms such as Coca-Cola and Citibank. Mr. Seth is a best-selling author and a columnist. He regularly appears on Indian news channels and writes columns in numerous publications, including Daily News and Analysis, the Financial Times, and the Financial Express. As a man of multiple talents, Mr. Seth is also a well-accomplished actor, having performed in over 130 plays and in films such as Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara and Guzarish. Thank you for joining us today, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Krishna Allavuru, who is the Joint Secretary of All India Congress Committee, AICC, and the National in Charge of India Youth Congress, IYC. Mr. Allavuru is a lawyer by profession who has been associated with student politics since his days at the University of Delhi. He deems the youth as the catalyst of societal and political change. He spearheads the organization in all fronts, be it in taking on the government on any issue or making outreach programs in a different part of the country. He is a supporter and an encourager of the youth to influence meaningful social and political change, exemplified by his work on numerous campaigns, outreach programs across the country, and now by leading the Indian Youth Congress. As the Joint Secretary of All India Congress Committee, Mr. Allavuru is one of the key stakeholders in drawing out the roadmaps of the organization. Thank you for joining us, sir. Our fourth panelist was Mrs. Atishi Marlena Singh, who is an MLA and the national spokesperson of Aadmi Party in India. But unfortunately, due to some personal reasons, she's not able to join us today. We wish her all the best and hope to have her on LIF in near future soon. Finally, I'll be introducing our moderator for the evening, Dr. Lloyd Gruber, who's the Program Director of Master of Public Administration at the School of Public Policy at LSE. Dr. Gruber is the former Dean of LSE's Public Affairs Institute and is a lecturer in political economy of development. He is a multi-award-winning expert in this field and has numerous publications on international politics and the economy. He is responsible for innovative research and now primarily focuses on globalization, particularly its causes, consequences, and impacts in developing world. Dr. Gruber notably wrote the book called Ruling the World, which provides an insightful view on globalization and has more recently been tackling the not so fair trade coffee. Thank you for joining us, sir, and for leading the discussion forward with our esteemed panelists today. Before finally opening to discussion, just wanted to point out a few housekeeping notes. Since this is an online webinar, we might have some internet connectivity issues, but be assured that our team would ensure that the panel discussion runs smoothly. We aim to have Dr. Gruber moderating the discussion for about an hour, and then we'll open it up for the audience for last 20 minutes. The audience can send in questions through the chat box, which I will constantly monitor and pick out the most relevant questions. If you have a question targeted for a particular panelist, please mention their names. And now, without any further delay, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Gruber. Thank you.
Great. I hope everyone can hear me. And please do take Hasti up on that offer to ask questions as we go along. So Hasti said she was humbled to be in the presence of these speakers. I am also humbled. I'm also humbled to be in the presence of Hasti. Hasti deserves a lot of credit for putting all this together. We go way back. She took my course in the political economy of development here at the LSE last year. I've seen her progress, lightning speed. She was pretty good when she came in, but I would say give her a year or two and she's going to be, I don't know which party in India she's going to be running, but it will be one of them, and that's terrific. She's been really great. So this panel, just for me personally, is a nice, I want to say, break from the action. So I've just been spending a lot of time thinking about a fast-moving crisis in the Ukraine, as we all have, and writing about it. I just posted a blog about it. Every day, it seems like every hour things are changing. Most of my time these days I spend worrying about a much slower burning crisis, the crisis of education in India and other developing countries. Today's panel, it's not a fast moving crisis, and maybe it's not a crisis, the speakers will tell me, but it's somewhere in the middle, and maybe by the end of our session, we'll see where we're at. The big picture is there's an election coming up in 2024, and the BJP looks like they're in a fairly strong position, but we've got some time between now and then. And the question on the table is whether the opposition, including parties represented here, can get their own acts together internally to compete effectively, but also potentially form alliances that would make a more credible a threat to the BJP. That's not going to be easy, and it's really important to talk about what those challenges are, to get them on the table and think about how they might be overcome if those parties, if you or I'm looking at the speakers, but also if India is going to pose a challenge to the opposition, which would be good even for the BJP if they were to win. For democracy to work, you need a credible opposition. So how are we going to get there? So that's the big picture. It's an exciting topic, and I'm really excited. I'm going to learn a lot over the next hour or so. The way this works is I'm just going to ask the speakers all the same question. I'll go and tell you what the big question is going to be, and then invite them to speak for 5 or 6 minutes to sort of state their their answer or the set of answers, and then we'll come back and we'll sort of open it up a bit. So the big question is for all of them, and maybe we'll start with Supriya. So do you think the newly formed regional alliances across various Indian states that have just been, seem to be taking shape, are they going to shake the foundations of the ruling government? Is this something that the ruling, I used the word threat before, should they be threatened by it in current elections, and then perhaps looking forward to 2024? Are these regional alliances something, is it possible? Or conversely, might you see some parties doing really well in certain states, but the idea of having them coalesce with other parties is just not going to happen? The differences, the internal divisions are too great. There might be personality differences. Well, the three of you will tell me whether this is something that we can look forward to in a positive way, or perhaps if you're the BJP in a negative way. So Supriya, I'll start with you, and then perhaps move to Krishna, and then finish up with Suhel. Okay, Supriya, floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, LSE and Hasti, for putting this entire group together today. It's lovely to see my friend Suhel on it. Makes me feel so comfortable and makes the whole next 1 hour much easier than it would have been with strangers. But I think on a very serious note, in a democracy, nobody threatens anybody. I don't think we are as an opposition waiting to threaten or decimate or all these big words that people use in a democracy. I can't relate to them, because I think this is an ideological fight. It's a fight about policies. It's not a personal thing. So I think what we really need to do is have more dialogue, reach out to more people. And I don't think 2024 is such a big challenge, or anybody in this universe is invincible. So I really look at it slightly differently. And 2 years is a long time in politics, long time. I mean, I remember Nirmala ji, when she was reading the budget, she was looking at, to give you a small example of how unpredictable life can be. She was looking, and when she kept talking about the budget to us, explaining the nuances of it, she said to us in a budget speech that, I don't see the oil prices cross 75. And look where we are today. I mean, just within a month, 1st of February was our India's budget. And look where we are. Look where the inflation numbers are going right now. And so every 2 years is a long time in politics. So it's not fair to see it. And if you see state after state, BJP has not done as well as they've done in the past. So I'm never overconfident about anything, but I think it's more about what India needs, what India deserves. And I think in any vibrant democracy, it's lovely to have people, debate, maybe even I'd go to the extent sometimes argue. And we need to see what's in the larger interest of our nation, which is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. And I think putting people together, even Atalji, which was a NDA government, had so many partners. So I really don't feel coalitions in India is strategically bad or harmful for India. We've had great coalitions. Sometimes the Indian voter is so unpredictable because he or she really play their cards very close to their heart. I mean, in 2004, it was 2004. I remember the BJP would rule for the next 100 years is what the whole world felt, and UPA came to power. Nobody thought we would come to power. Even we were not so sure, and boom, we were in power. So it's India is like that. You can't just get swayed by things or just by media reports. So I would tread carefully on 2024.
You would tread carefully. Can I just get you to maybe elaborate on your party in particular, on Congress? You're open to coalitions, but is there something that you feel your party needs to do to get its own house in order, to make itself perhaps a more attractive coalition partner, but even putting aside coalitions that can put you back at the center of national politics?
Gruber, I don't want to sound arrogant, but both the sides are always running after us. So we are quite sought after right now. I mean, I don't want to be arrogant about it, but I'm very, with humility, I say that. But we've been a very loyal ally to the Congress, and data speaks for itself that in good and bad times, we stuck it out with the Congress, because this is not just a fight about being in power. It's about what you believe in. It's what about your ideology is. So the only reason we have stuck it out with Congress, we've had our moments with them. I won't say it's like a marriage. It's never perfect. It has its highs and it has its lows. So we've had our challenges with the Congress in the past, but we've always managed to work it out. And that's what a democracy is. You have to give in a little, sometimes you have to take a little more. But I think to get our house in order is, you should always introspect, because everybody always, there's always something lacking and you must improve. So NCP as a party always is introspecting. We always want to do better in the sense it's not about just winning an election. It's delivering superior results. It's serving the people better. It's about my country first and then about the organization. So I think that's what we have been doing, and we've tried our best. We've delivered superior results in the past, and we will continue to do the same, but we are very, very, very committed to a vibrant democracy. We want dialogue, we want a debate, we want a healthy debate. And whether you're in power or in opposition, both roles are very, very relevant and important. And we are committed to our relationship with the Congress, and we want to expand our allies, because the BJP doesn't like allies. They've dumped all of them.
Yeah. That's great. Well, maybe we'll come back to some of this. That's excellent. So Krishna, your bite at the apple. What do you think about these regional alliances, the prospects for regional alliances? What does the future hold for us?
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Hasti, fellow panelists. I think it's a pleasure, privilege to be part of this event. I think, let me start out by talking about alliances, more in the context of the current elections, and then we can kind of look into the future a little bit. I think alliances get a lot of injustice done to them. I mean, they're looked at in black and white: success, failure, good, bad, possible, impossible. I think the nuances are more complex. I think we're talking about alliances which operate in shades of gray. So if you just take the alliances that are being formed in the current elections, I mean, 5 states have gone to elections, the last one is still going on. I think the success of the alliances in taking on the BJP varies from state to state. So if you take UP, for example, I think that's an example of a state where the alliance is posing a significant challenge to the ruling BJP. The SP-led RLD and some of the other smaller parties, and even with parties outside the state, I think what we're seeing in UP is a formidable alliance, which is definitely making the BJP sweat. What the results are going to be, we'll have to wait and see. 10th of March is not far. But that's definitely a case of a state where an alliance seems to be working. The other states, the answer is not so clear. In Goa, we don't really see alliance outside the state taking on the BJP. I think what we see there is an alliance more from partners within the state. And there it's not very clear how much the BJP is threatened by cross-state alliances. In Uttarakhand, there's really not a serious alliance to speak of. It's largely a bipolar fight, there, a bi-party fight.
Yeah.
Punjab, the BJP is really not a force, and there's really no alliance that is of any significance. Manipur is the last state, and there what we see is that candidates matter more. Tribal, clan loyalties matter more. The underground, the KNO, they have a significant amount of influence. So there does not seem to be a serious alliance play. So the answer for the 2022 elections is, it depends and varies from state to state. From a state like UP, where the alliance is a formidable force, to a state like Punjab, where it's really not even an alliance that needs to take on the BJP. Now, extrapolating to 2024, which was part of your question, I think definitely an alliance would play a big part and should play a big part in whatever way things play out. And I do agree with Supriya that 2 years is a long time in politics. I mean, if you just go back a few years, at the end of 2018, after the elections in Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Telangana at that time, I mean, the Congress was riding a wave. We won 3 out of those 4 states, and the BJP lost 3 heartland Hindi states. And then we saw what happened in 3-4 months in 2019. So a lot can happen in politics, but for 2024, I think strategic alliances are definitely something that like-minded parties should consider. So that's what I'll start with for now.
That's great. And just on the BJP. So again, 2 years from now, things might look different, but Supriya said that BJP is not interested in alliances. It doesn't need an alliance at the national level to get to where it's gotten. But do you think that it might in a couple of years' time be in a position where it would need to and be willing to reach out, or you think that's just not in the cards?
Well, it depends on how things play out. I mean, if the BJP does well in the elections between now and 2024, they're going to be less open to the idea of alliances and less wanting to form alliances. But if things don't go the way they want them to go, I think they will definitely be more open and more flexible in seeking out alliances. Yeah.
So political scientists, the sort of jargon way to put this is that an alliance formation is endogenous. If they need it, but if they need to do it, they'll be flexible. Their flexibility is not something baked into the party. It's contingent on the electoral environment, which is something that can change. Excellent. So Suhel, what's your take on this? Alliances, are they in the cards for the future? And yeah, maybe we could talk further about the challenges that.
I think as a good professor, you haven't asked the right question.
Is that a good professor or a bad professor?
Why are alliances formed anywhere in the world? Mm-hmm. They are formed only on 2 premises. Premise 1, if I have ideological alignment. Number 2, if I have avarice for elections. Mm-hmm. Sadly, in India, the trend of late, Krishna alluded to that, so did Supriya. Alliances have largely been formed based on virability, which, by the way, isn't a bad thing. I mean, in a democracy, someone needs to win. The BJP is less government, more an election machine. And that's the reason for some tragic circumstances as well, because everything now revolves from election to election. You know, Alice in Wonderland said beautifully of academia when she said, lessons are those that lesson from lesson to lesson. Today in India, we are seeing the election cycle actually overtake the policy imperatives, which is not a good thing. Number 2, you have a functional clown in the union government called Ramdas Athwale, who has publicly in parliament said, I was with the Congress because I thought they'd win. But when I saw the winds of fortune change, I moved to the BJP. That is actually an indictment, not of the Congress. It's an indictment of politics in India, because he's actually indicting the BJP. The BJP, as the Congress has, the NCP, I'm not saying this because Supriya is on the panel, the NCP has largely been aligned with the Congress and vice versa. In fact, the Congress has shown more consistency in its alignments, and they've kind of stayed the course, unless, there's been a virulent opposition within the Congress. See, the beauty about the Congress, with due respect to Krishna, is they love to fight within themselves. They're not that gladiatorial when it comes to outsiders. So they'll, go for Amrinder Singh, but it's very unlikely that they'll go for BJP. Mm-hmm. But I think the question that begs an answer is any democracy good when there is an overwhelming a rule of just one party, and how will that party spread? Now, there are also certain myths, Lloyd, and the BJP has mastered the art of communication without factual support many a time. Take a look at India as a composite whole. In large parts of India, the BJP is completely absent. It's a fact that they made great strides in the east through Bengal. But again, in Bengal, Mamata Banerjee fought and fought hard. But the fact is the BJP did make severe inroads into Bengal, even though they had bet everything on it. Number two, if you look at the entire southern belt, they are primarily absent. They are absent in the two most important states, Kerala, as well as in Tamil Nadu. Come to a state like Goa. Goa in the last elections, to my mind, if I were the Supreme Court, I would have sacked the election commission for what happened. What happened was a travesty of justice, and it was only because Digvijay Singh was literally sleeping on the watch. He happens to be a Congress party guy who was in charge of Goa. And immediately you had everyone who from the Congress had won switch to the BJP. People, the wicked people say it wasn't for money. Go figure. But the reality is you can't have a political vacuum as far as other political parties are concerned. So India is today balancing two things. We are balancing the lack of ideological consistency in many political parties, and that's worrying. You suddenly can't change positions overnight because you want to win an election. Number two, what is even more worrying is that the electorate is forgiving of this trend, because then that tells you that the electorate doesn't care. Krishna made a very important point when he talked about caste and individuals. We still have in India caste being a major determinant. And if a particular individual represents a particular caste in a particular region and you need help of that caste, you co-opt the individual in the hope that you're co-opting the caste. Mm-hmm. So alignments, associations are actually being formed today for the short term. This will create long-term damage, because in the long term, what will happen is you will create an equalizer of either principle or ideology, neither of which you want. Number one. Number two, the BJP is no longer the strong, mean machine it used to be. And if there are fault lines that are going to be visible in Uttar Pradesh, there'll be people baying for everyone's blood within BJP as well. Also, please remember, BJP uses masochism of a very different order in order to say that, look, we are the ones who are ruling India. These chinks in the armor will show up. Finally, I'll leave you with one thought, Lloyd. India, other than Jawaharlal Nehru, has never predicted a future prime minister. No one ever imagined that Deva Gowda would be prime minister. I don't think I.K. Gujral's own family imagined he'd be prime minister. No one imagined Manmohan Singh would be prime minister and then to serve 2 brilliant terms. No one imagined Modi would be prime minister until 2013 when he was announced. So to get into predictive logic is a very dangerous game in India. Please remember, it was the same Indira Gandhi who, after emergency in 1977, was thrown out and came victorious in 1980. Her son, because of the deep tragedy of Mrs. Gandhi's assassination, came with the largest mandate in Indian parliamentary history in 1984, and then was out of the door. Supriya very rightly alluded to Vajpayee. In India, you can't be a ringmaster. You have to be the best Philharmonic conductor. You've got to know when you start the music, but more importantly, you know when you need the drum rolls. So if Modi were to ever morph from being a former tea merchant and a current prime minister into this magnificent conductor, then it'll work. But things don't work alone. India is not a country where one person has been able to, turn the tide of affairs, as it were. So I'm a great believer. The jury's out in 2024. Every election as a run-up, a state election to 2024, will help you read the tea leaves with more finality. Mm-hmm. Did you ever imagine Boris Johnson would be your prime minister? I don't think even Stanley imagined that, his father.
Yeah, I come from the United States. Did Donald,
Did
did
you
anyone
imagine
think
Trump?
Donald Trump would be?
There you are. There you are.
So there you are. Yes, it's democracy. So I have this terrific set of comments, lots to chew on. Let me just go back through and ask, starting with Supriya, do you have any immediate reactions to what Krishna and Suhel said? And I'll do the same for the others too, and then I'll try to inject some comments in as well.
Unfortunately, what has happened in India, and I see it globally, television, media, and technology has really sort of disrupted our lives, I feel. And a lot of things are put out of context, out of proportion. And I just feel as a society at large, we've become less serious about things. And I feel that about my own job. I mean, like Suhel said, that it's not only about winning an election, it's about really delivering superior results in the larger interest of your nation. I mean, if we were in anybody in governance, I think your first priority is what are your final goals or commitments that you really made to your people. It's like in India today, unemployment is one of the largest challenges. So why are we not debating unemployment at length, depth? And we're all on the same side when it comes to issues which is for the nations, like when it is the virus. It's not about you versus me, it's all of us against the virus. So I think somewhere, and I'd go back to Atalji again, which Suhel also mentioned, is I think he was one of the tallest leaders India saw. And what is nice about him, and I bring him back because I have literally seen him work in an alliance, or even Manmohan Singh ji as a prime minister, they were team players. Mm-hmm. So I think India needs more team players now who are willing to listen, take criticism as good feedback in larger administrative decision. It's not my way or the highway. And unfortunately, I see that happening all over the world. I think the whole game is tilting towards it's only my way. And that's what's causing the pain we're watching on television today. And it's going to have repercussions on each one's lives. And the same thing in India. You know, I think everything's too volatile. Everything is high pitched. And I am completely disappointed with him. And sometimes I even get disillusioned by it because this is not my politics. This is not why I joined politics. Mm-hmm. I truly joined politics to make a difference in people's lives. It's not about us versus them. You know, so I sometimes have my moments and I say, my God, I really want to work on legislation. And I'll give you a small example. When there is legislation, we give good suggestions. If they even took one suggestion from the opposition, it's something good, right? It's your bill anyway, so you are going to take credit for it. So why can't we have, and I think Atalji or Manmohan Singh ji were far more open to taking feedback. I saw relationships across parties to be very deep and very honest, committed, and life is much more simpler than what it is today.
Can I ask, yeah, I mean, my background in the United States is relevant here. So we're talking about, you know, the theme is alliances. To have any sort of alliance requires compromise. And one question, it's a basic question, is whether it's possible for party leaders to compromise to the extent that the parties are ideological, to cross the aisle, as they say in the United States. Can they do that when the electorate is polarized? And is the difficulty, do you see, I've asked this to all three of you, is the difficulty looking forward in forging these alliances rooted in problems with the leadership, or is it ultimately that the Indian electorate has become much more extremist? The policy divides now are greater, and the policy issues that people are debating and are dividing them are not just left-right kinds of issues. There are all sorts of issues. And so when you have voters on, you know, in their pitch camps, it's hard for leaders to make compromises. How much of it, I mean, stay with you, Supriya, how much do you think is it rooted in the Indian electorate? We won't see these kind of alliances forming and doing well until there's less polarization in the electorate, or maybe that's putting the cart before the horse. I don't know. What do you think? Yeah.
You want me to
Yes.
take
Why
it?
don't you take a first crack at it, and then we'll.
When you said compromises, everybody compromises in life, and nothing wrong in that. I mean, why are we looking at compromise as negative connotation? It could be like a
No, it's not negative at all. I think in today's world, if you want to make, I mean, you're frustrated because people aren't working on real problems, that unemployment and things that really matter. And one of the reasons for that is because they're unwilling to reach out to the other side. So I think compromise has to be the answer, but it's very hard to do, and that's what we're talking about. So, yeah.
No, compromise in the sense that at a policy level, it's not about compromise, and that has nothing to do with alliances. And it's nothing. What I was talking about, a clear left and a clear right. So even if left is in power, they could take inputs from the right and vice versa.
Yeah.
And alliances are different. Alliances are obviously sometimes you walk 2 steps forward, maybe a step backward, but that's what a democracy is, right? It can't just go one way, the way I want it, or anybody wants it. So I think I won't say alliances have their moments, but it depends on who leads the alliance. There could be a wonderful Manmohan Singh ji and a wonderful Atal ji leading an alliance where everybody is happy. It's a win-win situation. So why can't we look at that? So there are good models and other bad models. It's like a business. So, it is business vis-a-vis business. One does very well, one does badly. So it doesn't mean that business is bad, right? So it's very simple. And there can be good alliances in the larger interest of the nation. And please understand, India is very complex. India is a very, very complex country, which needs to be nurtured.
Good.
That's
Krishna, can I get
that's
Krishna
what Suhel said, that look at the South, look at the East, there is no BJP there.
Yeah.
And even in a few northern states, why only are we looking at the East? It's all about perception. It's not really all about reality.
There's several things there, but Krishna, I can get you to react to the other speakers, but also just perhaps this issue of that Supriya has just put on the table about leadership. Maybe, as a political scientist, someone who studies international relations in his spare time, I tend to look at these big structural forces at very high altitudes, and maybe what really matters for the topic of the day that we're talking about here is individual personalities and leadership at an individual level, and maybe thinking about these larger structures is missing, not the big picture, maybe missing the small picture that turns out to be the big picture. So Krishna, what are your thoughts?
So I do agree that politics in India today is quite polarized. Does that mean that forming alliances or forging alliances and making them work is difficult? Yes. Is it impossible? Absolutely not. I mean, history has shown us, not just in India, whether it's international alliances, whether it's the NATO, the UN, or whatever, that leadership that rises above the complexities of the situation. And some of these leaders have risen beyond complexities which are far greater than many of us can imagine. And they have successfully made coalitions stick, work, sustain. So I do think that in India, we have seen coalitions work. Supriya gave the example of Vajpayee ji. He did a wonderful job in making a coalition stick, sustain, work. He provided leadership, vision, flexibility. The same thing we saw with Manmohan Singh ji. For 10 years, I mean, it was a rainbow coalition and alliance. Some of us would never have thought that they would last 5 years, let alone 2 terms. So complexities go with alliances. I mean, there's people, there's ideologies, there's power, there's other pulls and pressures. But I think what finally makes things work is good leadership. And that's an important ingredient. I mean, if you go back and look at Bihar, there was a Mahagathbandhan that came together. I mean, JDU, RJD, the Congress. They successfully took on the BJP in the last election. That was a good pre-poll alliance. It worked for the elections, but could not stay together post the elections. So I do agree with Supriya ji that elections alliances should not just be to win an election. I think we should have a vision for these alliances which are beyond winning elections, which is about governance, which is about development, which is about progress, which is about unity, which is about positivity. And I think a lot of that comes from good leadership from the various partners. I mean, take Maharashtra today, for example. I mean, who would have thought that you would form a government in Maharashtra with the Shiv Sena chief minister, with the NCP as a strong partner, and with the Congress as an alliance partner? What was probably difficult to imagine before the election is actually working pretty well, probably better than most states ruled by a single party and a strong mandate. So I do think that leadership, visionary leadership, can really make an alliance successful, even in very complex situations. So I think that, is the number one requirement for any kind of successful alliance, pre-poll, poll, post-poll.
Yeah, there's a I'm going to come to Suhel in just a minute, but I keep relating this to political science models of elections and democracy, and there's a deep point in what both of you are saying, which is you might have an electorate that's quite polarized. If you're sort of mapping it, it's two big poles, and the center is effectively empty, or maybe there's not two, there's three or four, but a leader can occupy that space in the center and pull the poles together and govern effectively, even if the voters themselves are at loggerheads. Politics can be a kind of tranquilizer. It can calm both sides down, and maybe the leaders who do that, the word vision has been used a lot. Maybe it's partly vision, and maybe it's even in their electoral interest to do it, because solving people's problems is ultimately what will get them reelected. Suhel, what's your view of, and you can react to what the other speakers have said as well.
So Lloyd, if you ever come to India, the favorite dish of most Indian politicians is crow meat, because they eat crow so often in the context of what they've said in the past.
Yes.
Balasaheb Thackeray, who was the founder of the Shiv Sena, had heaped venomous abuse on Mrs. Gandhi, not Indira, but Sonia, for years. You never imagined that these two parties would come together, but they have.
Mm-hmm.
And we have seen examples of this happen all the time. I mean, Narendra Modi's abused more people, gotten more abused as well, poor chap. And yet when it comes to, alignments, so you've got to understand the nature of alignments. As far as polarization is concerned, I have a more academic answer to your question. Across the world, we are seeing national, regional, local identity come to the fore. And this has happened in the last 10, 12 years. To say that we are seeing the rise of extremism or right-wing behavior is absolutely right. But its antecedents are found in social demographics that are fast changing. Mm-hmm. I mean, I happen to work on the Remain and Leave campaign for a particular party in the United Kingdom. And outside Greater London, everyone wanted to leave the EU because jobs were being taken away by nationalities of other EU member countries. So you've got to understand that the psychographics and the social mores of a rapidly changing and a more connected world are taking its toll even on democracies and elections. That's number one. Number two, the narrative when you talk about religion or you talk about caste, that narrative often clouds the realities of existence. The realities of existence are very simple. Food on the table, clothes to wear, an education that is worth it, and healthcare for all. You tell me how many democracies are actually working towards these four things? No. I mean, you, in your previous country of residence, y'all fought for ages for a healthcare system, a functioning healthcare system. I don't know why the Brits still continue to heap abuse on the NHS. NHS at least still performs. Look at India. We have many issues of developmental politics to contend with, and yet polarization seems to be the only draw. What does that say about Narendra Modi? Nothing. What does it say about us? A lot. You know, I think it was Churchill who said, or I can't remember who said it, who said that democracy is a terrible form of government, but the only one we have. A democracy means nothing. I mean, casting a vote every 5 years gives you no rights as a citizen, other than the fact that you believe you have changed leadership. And as Krishna rightly said, what is the brand of leadership today versus the brand of leadership yesterday? Yesterday, you were living in harmony because you had one agenda. The agenda was nation first. Today, the agenda has sadly moved to party first. In some parties, it has moved to individual first. In other parties, it has moved to individual shall remain. I mean, what the hell are you doing in terms of a democracy then? So how do you change the idiom of Indian politics? By only one way. If you continue to showcase development, which is non-caste, non-sectarian, non-religious, non-gender, and on the other hand, you talk about the country rather than about the party. What did Manmohan Singh do? He ran, to my mind, as Supriya and Krishna have both said, he ran not just a great government, he was a soothing balm for the soul. So was Vajpayee. Please remember, it was Vajpayee under whom we went nuclear. And we were then sanctioned by the Bill Clintons of the world. We were a pariah. I mean, Ukraine is nothing compared to what India was in those years. And yet, Vajpayee built on consensus. So what has happened is, it's a bit of George W. Bush Jr. theory in India. Either you're with me or against me is the feeling of the current dispensation. And by the way, I hate all political parties. I have no political idiom or leanings. But I will also say that Modi has also been heaped abuse on because he's not people like us for a large section of society. The third, which Supriya alluded to, and it's an important point that I'm about to make, the tenor, tonality, and the intrusiveness of media has never been as dangerous, as almost pernicious as we are seeing it in India today. You know, you talk about fake news. I'm not worried about fake news. I'm worried about agenda-driven news, which makes people do things or makes people believe in things that may not have actually happened. If a news article or a tweet can trigger a riot, I worry for my country. If a news article or a tweet can vitiate the atmosphere of people coexisting in peace and harmony, I worry for my country. What can we do about it? Nothing. This is not a country like Russia where you shut down all channels and announce that there'll be a 15-year jail term for something that the government deems fake news. So we are living in very, very dangerous times. To therefore ascribe polarization only to the Indian electorate is unfair. We're seeing polarization across the world. What do you think Boris Johnson did? He didn't have a strategy for Remain. He didn't even know that on June 27, when the referendum results would be announced, he would win. So the reality, Lloyd, is, sorry, you're on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute. Yeah.
So I was going to say that after Boris won, he ran for cover. He was so surprised and terrified.
So the point I'm making is, India has three great things going for itself. We have an unpredictable electorate, an electorate which can't be taken for granted. You know, Supriya talked about Kerala. I mean, I said South India. She also said, Krishna mentioned about, in all these states, there is a larger Hindu majority than a Muslim majority. So if everything was to go by the basis of polarization, these Johnnies would have won. So is the case in Bengal. Bengal Muslims are a minority. They're not a majority.
Yeah.
But for how long will temple bells satiate hunger? For how long will the azan be an appeal to you to get educated? These are temporary, optic-driven things. These are not real things. It's time for Indian leadership to realize that the Indian people need real food on the table. You shouldn't be worried about whether people can eat beef or can eat chicken or can eat vegetarian food. You first need to worry whether they have food on the table. You need to give them jobs. You don't need to give them hand-me-downs. The problem with India is every leader at a particular position then believes that he is actually doling out money. I don't need photographs on certificates of vaccination. I need more vaccines. That's the India I want to see. And trust me, it'll only happen with two things: more education and more realization that we are now moving towards a new world order. And we are seeing that world order. The opportunities for us to seize. Look at what's happening with the youth of India. I have great hope in the youth of India. And I also have fear. My fear is they shouldn't fall into this, what I call the polarization trap. You know, I was born and raised in Calcutta. We never discussed Hindu, Muslims, Parsis, Christians. Nothing. We celebrated every festival because we knew we'd get good food. Yeah, we weren't bothered. I mean, I remember no Christmas Eve was ever complete without mass at St. Paul's Cathedral in Calcutta. Why should I be made to feel guilty about what I feel? Why should I also be made guilty to believe what I believe in? And I think that is changing. I think the BJP is recognizing the fact that bulldozers are great for laying highways, not for laying people's lives at the mantle of despair. So they will realize. Please understand, it's a recent political party compared to even the Congress and other parties, including the communists. And I will tell you one last thing with certitude. Supriya says 2 years is a long time in politics. I can tell you, politics has no permanent friends, no permanent enemies. And now India is also noticing no permanent vote bank.
Terrific. So I have a whole slew of really good questions that have come from our audience, and many of the things all three of you have been saying will come up. So I'm going to go through these. I'll get through many as I can. This is one. Some of them are for just for Suhel, or just for Supriya, or just for Krishna. But this one is for all of you. The reliance on winning states like UP often becomes a talking point in Indian elections. Today, it's also a state, Uttar Pradesh, where alliances seem to have taken various shapes and forms. Many believe these combined forms can make a huge dent in BJP's dominance in that state. Will UP become the template for other states in India in the run-up to 2024? And just to add to that, I've been thinking about what Krishna started off with. You were talking about the variation, again, I'm wearing my pointy-headed political science hat, but we always look for variation in our dependent variable that we can then try to explain. And you talked about the UP being maybe one end of the spectrum, and then you have Punjab, where there's alliances are not really needed. The BJP is weak, so there's variation across states. And this is a question that's really for all of you. Is the UP the future? Is it a template, or maybe what explains the variation across Indian states in those kinds of alignments? Supriya, why don't we start with you?
Well, India's very different the way it votes at different times. It's not as predictable, and as Suhel rightly said, you can't take anybody for granted. I'll give you an example. When the BJP came to power in 2014, it was Akhilesh Yadav's government in UP. Mm-hmm. So, there's no guarantee. There is a feel-good factor for people when they win states. Why Uttar Pradesh? Any state for that matter. It's always a feel-good factor. The cadre feels encouraged, they feel good about life, and they work harder. So it's sort of, it's for the voters who are sort of the fence sitters who are unsure. They feel that, no, I think the wind is going in this way, so let's go in that direction. So there is a certain state, but I won't say that just because BJP got 300 MPs, they won in the last election, and they have lost state after state. Data speaks for itself. So I don't think you can take things for granted. And a lot of time people, I think India or people worldwide want very assertive leadership. They want people to take a decision. And I see that because look at Narendra Modi himself. It was assertive leadership that people saw, so they voted him. Look at what happened in Maharashtra. Mr. Pawar fought something when he had nothing. I mean, everybody had written us off. There were journalists calling us that they won't even, they won't even win a village, forget winning the state. People saw that. What did Mamata Banerjee do? She was, I mean, I don't want to be condescending, but she was almost getting bullied and cornered in a state. Same thing happened in Maharashtra. They were saying, oh, we can't see anybody. We're going to win it. So Indians by nature don't like overconfidence, is what I understand. Every time somebody puts up a good fight, they are willing to stand by the underdog because they feel that the underdog will deliver and seems more honest from within. And you've seen that. So I'm never, if you're overconfident about any election, there's no guarantee. And people want assertive leadership, and there's nothing wrong. I mean, that's why he's a leader, right? Who is going to be assertive? So whichever party, people want consistency and people want assertive leadership. They will judge you later whether the decision is right or wrong, but they want you to take a stand. And they want to fight. They want somebody to fight back. Indian people, I don't think by nature like bullies.
Yeah. Krishna, can I get your views on this? I mean, the question from the viewer is, from a member of the audience, is specifically about UP and whether does it offer lessons for other states, or is there something idiosyncratic about the UP that it's sort of a one-off?
I think I'd completely agree with what Suhel said, that the Indian voter is not very predictable.
Mm-hmm. As
far as UP being a template goes, I think typically templates only work as long as they're successful, and the jury's still out whether the UP template is successful in UP, and that's a question mark. The other thing that I do completely relate with is what Supriya said. I mean, the Indian electorate behaves very differently. They vote differently in assembly elections, they vote differently in corporation panchayat elections, and they vote differently in general elections.
Mm-hmm.
The dynamics vary from state to state. I mean, a UP template is not going to work in a state like Punjab, definitely not in Tamil Nadu or Kerala. It doesn't work in Goa. So I think it's difficult to kind of say that there is a formula, a template, a structure that will work across states, across times, across elections. I think we just have to take a flexible approach towards the 24 elections based on how things play out between now and then. Mm-hmm. But I do think that alliances can and should be formed, but not just from winning an election perspective. And I think from a broader common minimum program for governance, for development, for progress, for peace, for prosperity. And I think that template, that formula will vary from state to state and will evolve between now and 2024. And I think we should be open to what would be the right strategy at that point in time.
Good. Suhel, do you want to speak to the issue or do you radically disagree with Supriya or Krishna, or do you want to speak to the issue specifically of the UP and what lessons?
So I'll come to UP in a bit, but let me just answer a fundamental question wearing my ex-political science hat. There are two kinds of democracies and two kinds of people anywhere. There are some who love to be led but not ruled. There are some who love to be ruled but not led. India has always been the former. We like to be led, not ruled. We got rid of a certain bunch of people in 1947 who ruled over us. Mm-hmm. So any political leadership that tries to rule a disparate, diverse, disingenuous community or a country like ours will always suffer. In the long term, in the short term, you may be successful. But in the long term, as John Maynard Keynes said, we'll all be dead. Now, what is the kind of leadership we are seeing today? It's a leadership that we are seeing in large parts of the world, where there is more rule and less leadership. Look at Erdogan. Look at what's happening with Boris. I mean, any prime minister with even a shred of dignity would have resigned after the Christmas party scandals broke. Doesn't. You can fly in the face of criticism because you believe you're Teflon coated. But remember, Teflon is what you fry your eggs on, not what you build democracies with. Now, coming to Uttar Pradesh. To say that UP is a template for all of India is being unfair on both India and Uttar Pradesh. It happens to be the largest state in India, therefore providing the maximum number of members of parliament to India, where the federal government is formed. So it is because they can rule Delhi through that route that you must consider. But as Krishna says, Supriya alluded to it, and it's true for everywhere. The state elections are completely distinct from federal, from what I call national elections. That is why we need more national leaders. A Mamata Banerjee is a great regional leader. I'm not saying this because Supriya is sitting here, but Sharad Pawar is a national leader. People like him, people love him, people respect him. You might hate Rahul Gandhi, but Rahul Gandhi cuts across pan-India. Manmohan Singh, even though he wasn't a politician and a reluctant, initial prime minister, but even he cut across pan-India because what appealed to the average Joe on the street was his academic bent of mind and his calmness. So you've got to understand the kind of leaders. Now, and this is not a defense of Modi. Modi hasn't sneaked in through some goddamn backdoor and become the Prime Minister of India for a second time. People have elected him. Perhaps that's the brand of leadership that people want. You and I can't sit here and say, oh, but that's wrong because it's not the kind of brand of leadership that we would have liked. No. I mean, I like reading Hippolytus. You might want to read James Hadley Chase. I can't judge you for that. So the point I'm making is that you have to also analyze Modi and what Modi has brought to the party. All said and done, Modi is winning them elections, either through gimmicks, through promises. I'm still waiting for 15 lakhs of rupees in my bank account, but I don't think that day will happen. So people are waiting. Now, people are equally stupid, but then can everyone be stupid? Now, the question that needs to be answered is what percentage of India's population actually voted for the BJP? That needs to be done. Your colleague Mukulika Banerjee has done a fabulous job on decoding Indian elections and the caste influences and all the other influences. So I don't think Uttar Pradesh should be taken as a template. But what it will do is it will make the party, which is the BJP, humble, slightly less arrogant, and more amenable to listening. Yeah. Lloyd, you and I both know that there's an essential difference between hearing and listening. Hearing is a non-cognitive. Listening is cognitive. Yeah. I must make the effort to listen to you. I will hear you the moment you speak if I have functional ears. So the point, therefore, I want to end with is that please don't believe that Uttar Pradesh will decide the future or will decide 2024, but it will certainly decide the temper, the temperateness, and the mood within the Bharatiya Janata Party. If Yogi Adityanath wins, there'll be a lot of people in the BJP's top leadership who will worry. If he loses, now again, how would you define a loss? A lot of the people who hate Modi will say that even if his seat numbers come down, that's losing. Fine. But ultimately, it's the one who crosses the rope. So,
okay. I've got, we're a little short on time. So I've got 3 questions. This is fantastic. But I've got 3 questions now individually for each of you. I'll see if we can squeeze them all in. So maybe keep your answers relatively short. Supriya, you're going to love this one. This comes from someone in the audience who says, the NCP, like you've been saying, is a party both sides want and are occurring favor with. Does that make the NCP a lot more powerful than the 2 most dominant parties in the country? if a student today decides to take up politics, maybe choosing to join the NCP would be a much better choice. So Supriya, are you the kingmaker, another political science sort of concept that you might have these two dominant coalitions, but if you want to see who's in power, you got to look at the small party that's the kingmaker. Are you the kingmaker? And if you want to be powerful in India, is the NCP the way to go?
Now, if you want to join politics, you're most welcome, because it's a party which truly wants to make a difference. So it's not only about being in power. You could be in power and be completely incompetent. So I don't think the whole idea is only, politics is not about only being in power. Politics is far more deeper and meaningful than that. So I'm sure whoever has asked the question is most welcome, more the merrier. I'd be more than happy to have anyone and everyone join NCP, but it's not about just collecting people. It's about truly having a team. I just don't want, I mean, it's not like a revolving door or an airport where you just come because it's something good's going there and then they leave when it's time to take off. That's not what we want to build a party with very good people, with strong values, with a vision, and with strong ideology. And I repeat again, it's not, I mean, we just don't want to be a part of a, just have members and say, we have 1 million members. I mean, are they for real? Or is your party flooded with people who are from other ideologies and actually pushing people who really stuck it out with you in your most challenging times? So I think that sometimes parties need to, and NCP went through that in 2014 when we lost. It was so busy taking people from other parties that we forgot about people who really helped build this organization. And we suffered for 5 years. And all the ones who landed in the party fled and took off also at the same time. So I think all of us who really get people to come in, and when the going is good, really need to think about what's right. And I think we are being much more careful this time. We've learned the hard way.
Good, thank you. So Krishna, here's a question for you. It's about the Gandhi family, which has been the face of the Congress Party for decades. Perhaps the new generation is unable to relate with the family in the same way. And maybe there's a time to open up opportunities for the young and new dynamic leaders to step forward and lead. So the questioner is wondering whether it's time for Rahul Gandhi to change the strategy. What do you think?
So the question is, should we change the strategy or not? I think the answer is quite straightforward. Any strategy that doesn't work needs to be changed.
That's it.
There's no rocket science there, and there's probably not that much political science there.
No,
as well.
you don't need political science for that.
But let me kind of get beyond the generalisms to something more specific. I think the question is around family dynasty, which we get a lot. And my approach to this is very simple. And I think it doesn't matter, or it should not matter, which family you're born into. It should not be ideally a positive or a negative for you. And in the real world, that's really not how things work. I think there are a lot of strengths that I see in Rahul Gandhi. I think one of the strengths that you see is consistency. You can probably argue on a lot of things, but I think what you can give him credit for is that he is being ideologically consistent. He is being consistent in what he speaks for, who he speaks for, and even to a great extent, how he speaks. I think he's also the first person to admit that he has learned a lot in the last few years and is willing to learn going forward. There are also a lot of young talent in the Congress party that doesn't come from families. I mean, we have seen what the Youth Congress president, B.V. Srinivas, has done during COVID times.
Absolutely.
He doesn't come from a political family. He comes from very humble backgrounds. And the list is long. The current chief minister of Punjab does not belong to any political family, does not belong to an affluent family. He came into the position at a very difficult time, and given the short time period, has done a commendable job. both in governance and in keeping the party together. We also see that there are very capable people who are second generation politicians. Sachin Pilot is one, Supriya is one. So I don't think we should judge people just because they have a certain surname or belong to a certain family. I think what we should be looking for is what type of leaders are they growing into? And I think from that perspective, I'm very hopeful that we will have the right strategy and the right ingredients as long as we stay committed to the values that the Congress's founding fathers have left us. Those are special values. Those are time-tested values. And like Suhel was saying, you might win one election, you might mislead people and win 2 elections, but you can't fool all the people all the time.
Yeah, good. So Suhel, I was going to say you're going to like this question, although maybe you won't. It has you stranded on an island with the Prime Minister, with Modi for a day. The questioner wants to know, how would you spend that time with him? What would you talk to him about? What would you say to him?
Nothing. I just carry with me a large full-size mirror.
So that you think his reflection will be enough to let him, he'll see the error in his ways?
So I've always said, I don't know if you're a P.G. Wodehouse fan, because most Americans aren't. You have to actually study the language. So P.G. Wodehouse, there's a character called Lord Fauntleroy.
Sure.
Of Lord Fauntleroy was said that whenever he looked in the mirror, he erected his own statue. And there are 3 people in living contemporary memory who've done that. Winston Spencer Churchill, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, and to my mind, Narendra Damodar Das Modi. Whenever they look in the mirror, they erect their statue and are mindful of their legacy, which, by the way, is not a bad thing. You know, apart from the facetiousness of the question, I just want to take off from where Krishna left, because it's an important thing to discuss dynasty. If you don't begrudge a lawyer's son from becoming a lawyer or a doctor's son from becoming a doctor, why on earth would you discuss or begrudge dynasty? I think we are slowly moving towards meritocracy. Elections are won because the people want you, not because your father or your mother want to plant you in a particular chair. So we are seeing that more and more people are winning their elections and coming to power as they can, like any other citizen. On Rahul Gandhi, I will just say one thing. I've panned him a lot. I've at times praised him. Rahul Gandhi's problem is he's an idealist and not a politician. He's a reluctant politician because in his mind, and this is a very strange, ironic thing, Rahul Gandhi does not like politicians. And he believes that by doing something dramatically consistent or dramatically wild, he'll be seen as the Messiah. I mean, for all said and done about his consistency, when Manmohan Singh was taking the 11th step to meet Barack Obama in the Oval Office in America, Rahul Gandhi had rushed to the press club in Delhi and torn up an ordinance. It tells you about sagacity and maturity. Having said that, I said this before, I will say it again. Every point that Rahul Gandhi has made, the government has been unable to respond. When he talked about Soot Boot Ki Sarkar, the government did that for reforms, did that on reforms for 2 years. So for all the abuse they heap on him, they still listen to him. Having said that, I have no truck with Rahul Gandhi or Sonia Gandhi thing. My belief is the Congress party needs to reinvent itself, not for itself, but for India. NCP is not a political party for Maharashtra. It's a political party for Maharashtrians, for Maharashtra's citizens and India's citizens. When political parties realize that their ambit is beyond the scope of their political existence and must touch the social and the aspirational existence of the citizens of this country, will be a great country. But Lloyd, having said that, from the outside, I can tell you, we are very good at criticizing people like me. We're very good at, taking pot shots, but I know the enormous amount of hard work that our politicians do. So to that end, I I would never be in this profession, never, even if they paid me $1 million. But then par for the course. As George Bernard Shaw said of you, he could have said of me, those who can do, those who can't teach.
And as Woody Allen said, and those who can't teach gym. They teach phys ed. So we're almost out of time. I got one as academics say, one observation and a question to wrap up. The observation actually comes from Hasti, who observed that all three of you are wearing black, or at least it appears black. So perhaps there's some coalition potential.
I'm wearing it for reasons of body issues, because when I wear black, I look thinner than I really am.
That's too much information. There's thousands of people.
No, you asked me a question, I gave you an answer. I can't tell you I'm wearing black because I'm mourning Russia. No.
Yeah, well, so the question, we only have like a minute, but just any final reflections, and Supriya, I began with you. Do you have anything that you feel like we haven't addressed that needs to be addressed before we're done? And I'll turn to Krishna, and then Suhel, you'll get the last word.
I think right now, what the world is going through is something we all need to think. I think it's beyond the UP election. Life's far more deeper than just winning or losing an election. And I think this entire war is going to be a big turning point in all our lives. And we need to stop and think about it. We're just out of a pandemic into a war. It's not a great thing that we're going to leave for our children. I'd be worried.
Yeah, we deliberately, or at least I deliberately have not addressed Ukraine, and it is, it's, what a world we're living in. We were talking and worrying about the pandemic only a week ago, and now no one is thinking at all about it, at least in the news. I'm still thinking about it. And there are other issues like the one that as I said at the beginning, I do spend a lot of time worrying about, which is education, which has come up a couple of times. And there are these deep-seated structural problems with education in India, as in many other developing countries. And issues like Ukraine and the pandemic just drive those away, and which is really problematic. But now I'm talking when it should be Krishna. What do you have any final comments or issues or an issue that you think that we haven't addressed that those in the audience that should be thinking about?
I do have a message for all the youth out there, and that's in LSE, in England, in the United States, Latin America, Africa, Asia, wherever. And this kind of was prompted by the question that was posed to Supriya. I mean, should we join the NCP because you are in demand from both the big parties? I think the message that I have for the youth is, if you want to join politics, you should. You're most welcome. But I think more than joining politics, I think the thinking seems to be dictated by which is the right party to join. Mm-hmm. I think you should join politics for the right reasons, correct, irrespective of which party you want to join. I think, like Supriya has stressed, like Suhel has stressed, and I alluded to it at some point, is that at the end of the day, democracies seem to be the only form of government we have. And democracies, by definition, are made up of different parties. And if you join a party because you want to be on the winning side, you're probably not going to help democracy evolve into a better form of government. But if you join any party for the right reasons, because you want to do good, you want to do something for people, you want to make the world a better place, you want to change it for the better, I think no matter which party you go to, you will make a positive difference. And that's the message I'm leaving with. The right intent is more important than the right party.
Yeah, good. Suhel, so what message do you want to leave? It has to be very short. So
it'll be very short. It's the LSE. Educate, enlighten, be empathetic. These are the 3 E's that we need to worry about in today's world, and more so in tomorrow's world. If we can do these 3, it's a battle won. And more importantly, it's the fulfillment of aspirations.
on a very high note, in a very dark, dark times, and here in London, dark skies. That's a ray of sunlight on which to end a really fascinating panel. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
That was. I hope we can keep the conversation going. But really great to join you, and have a nice rest of the conference and rest of the weekend. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.